So now we can start, dear Irit. We had a little problem, not my first time on Zoom, but now we will start. Liebe Zuschauerinnen und Zuschauer heute, wir präsentieren mit der Deutsch-Israelischen Gesellschaft AG Köln im Rahmen der Reihe 75 Jahre Israel den Online-Vortrag von Irit Chen, Master of Arts, live aus Israel. Sie wird über die Israelmission des Staates Israel, hier bei uns in Köln, in den Jahren 1953 bis 1965 berichten. Ich freue mich, dass Sie heute bei dem heißen Wetter doch so zahlreich auf dem YouTube-Kanal der DIK Köln sich eingewählt haben, trotz des schönen Sommerwetters. Ich begrüße auch diejenigen, die den Vortrag zeitversetzt mit dem Link anschauen werden. Für uns sind 75 Jahre Israel ein großer Grund zu feiern. Wir begehen den 75. Jahrestag der Gründung Israels mit einer ganzen Reihe von Veranstaltungen. Einige liegen schon hinter uns und eine steht uns noch bevor, neben dem Vortrag von Irit Chen. Irit Chen forscht am Department for Jewish History and Contemporary Jewry an der Hebrew University von Jerusalem. Das ist nicht unser erster Gast von der Hebrew University und ich hoffe, es wird auch nicht unser letzter Gast sein. Ihr Dissertationsprojekt hat die Israelische Handelsmission in Köln zum Gegenstand, jenen israelischen Teil der Exekutive, der in der Bundesrepublik gesandt wurde, um in den Jahren 1953 bis 1965 das Shilumim Abkommen, zu Deutsch unglücklich Wiedergutmachungsabkommen, zu betreuen, bevor überhaupt reguläre diplomatische Beziehungen zwischen Deutschland und Israel im Jahr 1965 vereinbart wurden. Sie konzentriert sich auf die Aktivitäten der Handelsmission im Kontext der ambivalenten Haltung Israels, also Bandina hat es einmal die rituelle Distanz genannt, die Israels Haltung zu Deutschland prägt, und die ist gut verständlich, nur wenige Jahre, 8 Jahre nach dem Ende der Shoah. Sie prägte die frühen Kontakte zwischen Israel und der Bundesrepublik nach dem Holocaust und charakterisierten sie auch. Die Beziehungen bewegten sich im Schatten eines latenten und zuweilen sogar manifesten Antisemitismus. Es sei nur erinnert an die antisemitische Schmierkampagne 1959-60 an Weihnachten ausgebrochen. Nicht zuletzt auch mit der Schmiererei an der Kölner Synagoge, der neu errichteten 1959 im Dezember. Dieser Kontext ist eben auch prägend für das Handeln der Israelischen Handelsmission. Der Antisemitismus war in Westdeutschland nicht wirklich überwunden und im Spannungsfeld der Auseinandersetzung der Handelsmissionsakteure mit der deutsch-jüdischen Aktivität spielte das auch eine Rolle. Die Arbeit untersucht die Beziehungen zwischen Deutschen, Jüdinnen und Juden, Deutschen und Israelis in den ersten beiden Jahrzehnten nach dem Holocaust. Sie untersucht weiterhin, inwiefern die doppelte Bindung der Handelsmissionsakteure, die nach Israel zurückkehrten, eine professionelle zweite Sozialisation erfuhren, die sie als Akteure der Aussöhnung zwischen beiden Staaten erscheinen ließen. Jetzt noch ein kurzer Hintergrund zu Irit Chen. Sie absolvierte einen Master of Arts mit Summa Cum Laude in Modern German and European Studies an der Universität of Haifa. Ihre Masterthesis trug den Titel Contact but no established relations. The Israeli Consulate in Munich between Israel and Germany 1948 to 1953. Sie erhielt den Graduate Studies Dienstpreis für eine Outstanding Master Thesis. Sie absolvierte ihren Bachelor in Psychology und Political Science mit Summa Cum Laude an der University of Haifa. Zum Ablauf. Zunächst wird Ihnen Irit Chen ihren Vortrag präsentieren. Sie haben im Verlauf des Vortrags die Gelegenheit, Ihre Fragen in den Chat des Videos zu schreiben, sofern Sie YouTube abonniert haben. Alle anderen steht die Möglichkeit offen, Fragen an die Referentin per E-Mail an köln@dikev.de zu senden. Bedenken Sie, Köln mit OE zu schreiben. Wir freuen uns auf Ihre Fragen. Frau Chens Präsentation erfolgt in englischer Sprache. Ihre Fragen können Sie aber getrost auf Deutsch stellen. Ich werde sie als Moderator gerne und soweit es mir möglich ist, übersetzen. Noch ein abschließendes Wort zu unserer Reihe. Die Reihe 75 Jahre Israel wird gefördert mit Mitteln des Fonds der Arbeitsgemeinschaften der deutsch-israelischen Gesellschaft. Und wir sind froh, dass wir diese Förderung erhalten haben. Andernfalls hätten wir diese umfangreiche Reihe gar nicht vorbereiten können. Oder wir hätten sie vorbereitet, aber nicht realisieren können. Werden Sie Abonnentin oder Abonnent unseres YouTube-Channels. Da ist noch Luft nach oben. Wir freuen uns über jedes Like unseres YouTube-Channels. Auch ein einfaches Like auf unseren Vortrag hin freut uns. Und wenn Sie unser Angebot weiter wahrnehmen möchten, können Sie gerne durch eine formlose E-Mail unseren Newsletter abonnieren. E-Mail mit Ihrem Vor- und Zunamen an köln@dicev.de, wie gesagt, mit OE genügt. Ich schreibe das gleich auch nochmal in den Chat. Wir laden Sie auch herzlich ein, unseren Instagram-Kanal zu abonnieren und uns auf Facebook zu liken. Dann sind Sie immer up to date. Noch eine letzte Bemerkung, bevor ich Irit Chen das Wort erteile. Am 6. Juli entführen wir Sie ins bunte und vielfältige Israel und präsentieren Ihnen Nora Pestas und Idan Nachums Foto- und Essayband Wir in Israel in einem Bildvortrag mit Dr. Nora Pesta, der wirklich verdienstvollen Verlegerin des Hendrich und Hendrich Verlags Berlin und Leipzig. Der Ort wird auf Facebook, der Homepage der DKG Köln und via Newsletter in Kürze bekannt gegeben. Das Ganze pünktlich vor dem CSD. Wir freuen uns, wenn Sie auch dieses Angebot wahrnehmen. Und jetzt, and now, Irit Chen, it's your turn. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Hannes, for the kind introduction, and also mostly for the invitation to come and talk to you tonight in the framework of the Israeli society in Cologne. I have to say that I am very excited about this option and opportunity for two reasons. Of course, first of all, is I've been in the last few years working on early German-Israeli relations before the formal diplomatic relations. I'm aware to how much it is important to preserve the contacts between these two countries, and which are not to be taken for granted. And also, especially as Cologne is the city of the mission, of the Israeli purchasing mission that I am working on. So it is a great honor to talk in this framework. And what I would like to do today is to give you some examples and some taste of my research about the Israeli purchasing mission, and mainly talk about this early encounters between Germans, Israelis, and German Jews in the first year after the war and the Holocaust. So I will now share my screen. Let me. Can you see it? Yeah, perfect. Okay. So on September 10, 1952, State of Israel and the Federal Republic of Germany, West Germany, which from now on I will refer to as Germany, signed the reparations agreement, under which the latter undertook to transfer to Israel 3 billion German marks in the forms of goods as compensation for the absorption and rehabilitation expenses of Holocaust survivors. The agreement's 17 clauses set out its commercial terms and the manner in which the agreement will be implemented, including, among others, the dates of payments and the list of goods. Article 12, as you can see some part of it on the presentation, provided that for the purpose of its implementation, the government of Israel shall send to the Federal Republic of Germany as the sole agent a delegation whose function will be to carry out this agreement on behalf of the government of Israel. A preliminary reading of Article 12's subparagraphs indicates that the dispatch of an Israeli commercial delegation to Germany to implement the reparations agreement reflected the complex connection between the two countries only a few years after the annihilation of European Jewry by Nazi Germany. The Israeli representation was not defined as a diplomatic or consular mission. It was intended to act solely for the agreement's implementation, and it had no purpose to symbolize an official political rapprochement. The absence of an explicit wording regarding the close cooperation that was necessary for the successful implementation of the agreement also reflected the distance between the two countries. However, a careful reading between the line reveals implicit references to mutual encounters and cooperations between Israelis and Germans to implement the agreement. The subclauses specified that delegation members would be allowed to engage in all action necessary to implement the agreement, such as delivering orders to factories and suppliers in Germany and holding consultation with governmental or non-governmental bodies. If so, the 12th article of the reparations agreement expressed a duality according to which the delegation was supposed to work in Germany, over to distance, alongside covert communication and cooperation. 2 months after the ratification of the reparations agreement in the German parliament, the time had arrived for the dispatchment of the delegation to Germany. In May 1953, 40 Israeli emissaries made their way to Cologne Jewish Communities building on 85 Ottostrasse, which from this date on served as the first seat of the Israeli purchasing mission, also called as Israeli mission, in order to implement the agreement. While the Israeli mission's members operated to dispatch German goods to Israel, their own dispatchment to Cologne wasn't their first encounter with Germany. The Israeli envoys were natives of the German Sprachraum. They were born into families that had settled there for hundreds of years. They were educated at German schools and universities and gained professional work experience in German banks and economic firms. In the 1930s, following the rise of Nazism, they fled to mandatory Palestine, settled down, and later joined the new established country's diplomatic corps and commercial service. If so, in the 1950s, they returned to their place of origin, which from they were ejected as Israeli representatives. These dualities between the personal and the professional, and between connecting and avoiding, and between the two spaces they belonged, accompanied their daily life and their daily work routine until the closure of the doors of the mission in 1965, following the signing of diplomatic relations between Germany and Israel. This duality also lie at the focus of my PhD dissertation, which examines the work of the Israeli mission to Cologne in two perspectives. The first, the formation of early ties between Israel and Germany regarding the fulfillment of the agreement in light of this duality between contact and disconnection. And the second, the manner in which their German Jewish heritage was reflected in this endeavor. So in my talk today, I would like to share with you a few perspectives from my work. So my talk is consisted of 3 parts. The first will very briefly present a historical background of the relations between Germany and Israel from the mid-1940s to the first half of the 1960s. Just so we will have a general context. The second part will focus on the setting up of the mission by illuminating the delegates' conceptual and tangible re-encounter with Germany. And the third part shares a glimpse into the agreement's implementation process and discusses how this was a means of bridging the two countries, as reflected in the example of building German ships for the Israeli merchant navy by the reparations money. So let me start very shortly with the background. Years of Nazi Germany and the annihilation of European Jewry dictated the nature of connection between the State of Israel, which saw itself as a representative of the Jewish people, and the German Federal Republic, which saw itself as the successor to the German nation. From the establishment of the two countries, Israel in May 1948 and Germany in May 1949, up until the mid-1950s, the connection was shaped around Israel's political and cultural boycott of West Germany, the heir to the Third Reich, on the one hand. Thus, Israeli passports, as you can see on the left side of the slide, were stamped with a caption, "Not valid for Germany," and German newspapers were refused import license, and public performances in the German language were prohibited. On the other hand, the difficult economic reality and burden of immigration absorption led the Israeli government to adopt a more pragmatic approach to Germany. Bilateral contacts between the two countries thus began to develop with regard to the matter of material compensation for the catastrophic losses inflicted on the Jewish people in the Holocaust. Active measures to seek reparations were taken from 1951 onwards. In April, a secret meeting was held between Chancellor Konrad Adenauer and Israeli representatives, resulting in a public announcement by the Chancellor at the Bundestag about the readiness of the German government to reach an agreement with Israel on behalf of the Jewish people. In March 1952, direct negotiations began between the two sides, and half a year later, on September 10, the reparations agreement was signed. From the second half of the 1950s and over the following decade, the duality of the early relations between the two countries was preserved. Failure to establish diplomatic relations, alongside maintaining utilitarian contacts. However, during that period, it was Germany.
Excuse me, Irit,
Yeah.
I think you didn't start your presentation, or do you see, I see only your first slide.
No, I did. I am going through the presentation. So you can't see this, I understand. Okay. Let me maybe try once again. Can you see
the Israeli purchasing mission in Cologne, 1953 to 1965.
So for some reason it doesn't work.
Oh, that's better.
Now it's better?
Yes.
Okay, so I will leave it. So I will present the PowerPoint like that.
Yes.
I can only shortly just show you the other slides. One was the Article 12 that I discussed. And also I showed some, let's say, pictures relevant to the historical background.
Yes.
And I will continue now on.
Fine.
So,
excuse my interruption.
No, thank you very much for letting me know. It is very important. Okay.
I was switching between the channels and I didn't see it. Okay.
Okay, so I'm glad we worked this out, and now it is working. So I was talking. So I will continue about just shortly talk about the relations between two countries in the mid-1950s, and during that period, it was Germany which then received full sovereignty and conducted an independent foreign policy that refused to establish the relations that Israel wished to form. This policy was delineated by the Hallstein Doctrine, according to which it was decided to sever all contacts with a country that would recognize East Germany. Israel at this stage viewed the political economic strengthening of Germany and was interested in deepening relations, but it encountered the refusal of Germany, which was afraid of severing ties with Arab countries, considering the Hallstein Doctrine. Despite refusal by the German government to establish official relations with Israel, and perhaps because of it, military, cultural, and economic ties prevailed between the two countries. In the midst of this duality stood the Israeli mission to Cologne, and on May 4, 1953, 40 Israeli emissaries gathered for the first opening meeting in Cologne to launch the fulfillment of the reparations agreement. The envoys were greeted by the mission's head, Felix Eliezer Shen'ar, whom you can see here, who highlighted the members' individual responsibility for leading to a successful completion of the agreement. This moment, we can assume, must have been memorable for Shen'ar, who was involved in the Israeli demand for compensation from Germany already since May 1951, when he was appointed the director of the Office for Reparation Affairs from Germany in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Shen'ar was convinced that the future compensation agreement would require the dispatchment of Israeli representative to Germany to ensure a successful implementation. The direct negotiations he conducted as one of the two heads of the Israeli government, vis-a-vis representative of the German government on the demand for compensation throughout 1952, and the public opposition in Israel against these agreements, raised his concern about the ability to find people who would be willing to move voluntarily to Germany to implement the agreement. And I quote, and you can see this on the screen, "I do not ignore reality at all, and I know very well how difficult it will be to find the appropriate people who will agree to fill the position. On the other hand, it is necessary that in this matter, which may determine to a considerable extent our economic fate in the years to come, we will overcome these difficulties, even if a very strong influence and the necessary means are needed to get the people out of their whereabouts and convince them that it is their duty to serve the cause. End of quote. This future-oriented vision of Shen'al, both towards establishing contact with Germany by dispatching Israeli envoys and towards the economic importance of the agreement for Israel, must have been influenced by his personal and professional connection to both spaces, the German and the Israeli. Shen'al was born in 1905 in Stuttgart, in the German Empire, as Felix Schneebalg, and his life was shaped by the economic, cultural, and social life of the Weimar Republic. He completed his higher studies in the field of law and economics at the old universities of Tübingen, Frankfurt, and Heidelberg. The very next day after the Nazis took power, he experienced an anti-Semitic incident, which clarified to him the necessity to leave Germany, and I quote, disgusted by the transformation of people who had yesterday still been human beings. End of quote. In 1935, he fled to mandatory Palestine, and upon the establishment of the State of Israel, he was responsible for setting up the country's fuel system. When in 1951 he was offered to head of the Office for Reparation Affairs from Germany, he hesitated for several days until he answered positively. Despite this answer, he knew that in carrying out the task he undertook upon himself, he would experience a struggle between his feelings, on the one hand, and the realistic needs on the other hand. The ongoing conflict between the rationality and emotions continued to accompany his involvement in this matter, even during the negotiations in Wassenaar and throughout his mission in Cologne. Despite Shen'al's apprehension, as early as mid-October 1952, only 1 month after the signing of the agreement, about 3,000 applications had been submitted for staffing the mission. A perusal of application letters reveals that the common denominator for the applicants for service of the State of Israel in Germany was their early acquaintance with the German space. The applicants had been born in Germany or the German Sprachraum and had acquired the German language in infancy. Their letter of candidacy were written in Hebrew or German. It is possible that the applicants wrote in German to prove their proficiency in a language that was necessary for the day-to-day work in Germany. However, this may be due to a simple fact that their command of the German language was better than their command of the Hebrew language, since they had studied in German universities and had made their first professional steps in the German trade market in the 1920s and the 1930s, and in the implementation of the transfer agreement that was signed between the Jewish Yishuv in Mandatory Palestine and the Nazi authorities. If so, submitting candidacy to the ranks of the future delegation would have brought some of the candidates together with the space of their previous lives. The process of returning to Germany involved not only crossing the physical border between Israel and Germany, but also the personal emotional process that historian Marita Kraus called the settlement of borders in the heart. The returnees were to meet with their place of birth, with the house in which their family had lived before they had been separated, with a professional career that had been cut short, and with the people that had turned its back on them. The motivations that drove these individuals to apply for service in the delegation were varied. Some hoped for professional and economic advancement, or a return to the original occupation they had acquired in Germany before immigration, perhaps out of the desire to claim what belonged to them spiritually, the professional way they would have followed had they not been forced to immigrate. Others were interested in improving their or their family's health, which had been very affected by the foreign climate in Israel. In pursuing these letters, it can be seen that the applicants often detailed their connection to the German space in numerous ways. One was the geographical connection, their birth and early life in Germany, and even their acquaintance with those who would become the head of the reparations agreement mechanism in Israel. Other ways in which the connection to the German space was highlighted was by emphasizing the academic aspect, acquiring education at German universities, and employment, professional experience in commercial companies and factories in Germany, also in the implementation of the transfer agreement signed between the Jewish community and the Nazi authorities, as I already said. Another aspect through which the connection to the German space was highlighted was emphasis on the personal and professional connection to the city of residence of the delegation or the federal state. This can be shown, for example, in the application letter of a metal expert who lived in the city of Cologne for about 30 years before leaving the city. In his candidacy, he stressed that he was well acquainted with the local dialect, people, environment, and industry in Cologne, and even in the state of North Rhine-Westphalia. At the same time, he noted his professional experience, which was reflected in his management of a metal company in Cologne. And after his arrival in Israel, he worked at the transfer mechanism. If so, the arrival of the delegates of the State of Israel to Germany involved their arrival in their childhood districts, the physical and the social ones. These places evoked painful memories of the years of persecution and suffering, as well as of their own previous lives that had been shattered to pieces. So this involved a deep personal process. This can be learned, for example, between the encounter from the envoy I would refer to as PR and his childhood environment. He was born in 1928 in the city of Munich and immigrated to Palestine with his family in 1937. In Palestine, the family maintained German Jewish traditions, such as celebrating Hanukkah, fusion between Christian Christmas and the Jewish Hanukkah. At the same time, his family refrained from physically visiting Germany, and PR took over the service in Cologne only after obtaining his parents' consent. During his service in Germany, he traveled to see the house in which he had grown up. This reunion with his childhood space caused in him memories from the past, and as he stood facing the door, he suggested that his wife ring the bell and run away. This suggestion may have symbolized his return to childhood's games and nonsense, but it may have reflected an inner dilemma about returning to the realms of his past. Despite his physical visit to the childhood home and the various sites in Munich where he had grown up, he refrained from meeting people from his past. But not for everyone did the encounter with the home and childhood environment lead to wanting a complete detachment from the local society. For many German Jews, the encounter with people from the past actually eased the pain involved in returning to Germany and blurred the feeling of alienation in a place that had once been home. Probably for this reason, some of the families employed Germans they had known in the past, such as a family that employed a live-in nanny who took care of the mother of the family when she was a child in Germany. So while on the personal life, they could either get in contact or avoid contact with past German acquaintances, on the professional level, close cooperation with German colleagues was needed to fulfill the work successfully. The delegation members were to be in a daily contact with German suppliers and factories, request price offers, and negotiate prices. By virtue of these tasks, the delegation employees visited the German factories to examine and test German goods that were about to be sent to Israel. A tour of this type could last for several hours, so in most cases, the German host invited the Israeli guest to lunch together with them, and refusing this invitation would have harmed the German host and hindered the completion of the mission. Therefore, the Israeli representative could not help but reply positively. The fact that the mission's members acquired their professional experience in Germany prior to their immigration to mandatory Palestine contribute to their joint work with the Germans. German banks, for example, appreciated the functionality that characterized the work of Israeli bankers who served in the mission and the personal attitude that the latter showed towards them. These features were rooted in the tradition of German banking, which were characterized by personal relationship between the bank and its customers, and German Jewish bankers who immigrated to Israel and established local banks there preserved this German tradition in the new homeland as well. The daily professional encounter also turned into a personal encounter. An example can be reflected through the ties between Shen'ar, the head of the mission, and Karl Hermann Müller-Graf, head of the German delegation to the Mixed Committee, whose role was to deal with all questions arising from the implementation of the agreement. Müller-Graf's professional experience regarding Jewish property began as early as the 1930s as part of his work in the Reich Ministry of Economics. He devotedly supported the transfer agreement. His support for saving Jewish property even led to his dismissal and transfer to the Trade Department of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. In 1946, he published a book under a pen name that dealt with the rise of Nazism to power and their crimes. Less than a half year after the mission arrival in Cologne, the professional meeting between Shen'ar and Müller-Graf, which took place in the offices of the Mixed Committee in Frankfurt, were already moved to the private space when Müller-Graf was invited to the former's home. The transfer of the meetings from the public professional space to the personal private space made it possible to expand the topics of conversation between the two. During dinner, they talked extensively about Müller-Graf's book and about the possibility of the latter publishing a summary of the book for the Israeli public. Shen'ar assumed that this would bring to the public's attention, I quote, that among these people there are also exceptional ones, end of quote. Considering the feelings that accompanied his fleeing from Germany, as I mentioned before, one can only wonder whether it was an attempt to prove to himself and others that among the German, the people to whom he also belonged, there were people who acted differently. The lack of trust expressed in Israel against the delegation members who voluntarily returned to Germany and worked mutually with German firms reflected to some extent the lack of trust in the Bonn government. For example, at the end of 1953, after the signing of the contract between the mission and Stockholm Shipyard over order number 833, the first ship to be built for the Israeli National Shipping Company, SIM, the company requested that if the ship was not made available to them, and I quote, due to an obstacle caused by the German government because of its political relation with the State of Israel, including relationship relating to the implementation of the reparations agreement, we will be freed from any obligation we have taken upon ourselves. End of quote. Despite the lack of confidence in Germany's will to realize the agreement, the ship's construction was completed on time, and in the second half of July 1954, a government meeting convened in Jerusalem to discuss the consequences of launching a German ship to Israel on German-Jewish relation. Was it a joyous event for the German, the ship's constructors, or for the Jews, the ship's recipients? The main motive for dealing with this was rooted in a maritime tradition that developed in the last decade of the 19th century, according to which, when a ship is launched, a local woman smashes a bottle of alcohol on the side of the ship as a symbol of luck and a safe voyage. Therefore, the government members were to discuss who would launch the lowering of the ship into the water, the wife of the head of the Israeli delegation, Irit Chen, or a German woman. The position that was heard at the meeting demanded a separation between the two joyous events, as Jewish celebrations could not take place in Germany. Shen'ar's view over the ship's launching ceremony reveals that the delivery of the first ship built by the reparations money was a Jewish and a German celebration. The event was attended by representative of the mission, representative of the German Foreign Ministry, representatives of the Hamburg Senate, journalists, and community members of the local Jewish community. Even though the woman who was chosen to smash the bottle of the alcohol on the side of the ship was German, she quoted a sentence from the Wayfarers' Prayer in Hebrew, to reach our destinations in life, joy, and peace. At 4:40 in the afternoon, at the exact scheduled lunchtime, the ship was lowered into the water. The precise adherence to schedule aroused the great astonishment of Shen'ar, who expressed appreciation and respect for the punctuality of the German organizers. His speech, which was delivered in German, showed that in his eyes, the ship's launching was a festive event common to both countries and based on the German-Jewish past relations. He emphasized the importance of the reparations agreement for trade relations of the State of Israel with the world in general and with Germany in particular. The ship was designed to transport 75,000 boxes of citrus fruits, the largest export of the State of Israel. Just a few months before, he pointed out, in December 1953, the marketing of Israeli citrus fruits to Germany was resumed, and this was enabled due to the well-known quality of Jaffa oranges from the period before World War II, reflecting the roots of commercial ties between Germany, the Jewish Yishuv and German Jewry throughout the 1920s. Shenar's words, it seems, were somewhat of mediating voice between the Israeli position, that in the first half of the 1950s was not yet ripe for having political relations with Germany, and the latter which was interested in these relations. His words did not express an explicit statement about deepening political ties between the two countries, most likely to comply with the official Israeli position. But as someone who had lived in Germany and was attentive to the German desire for closer relations, his words included a statement about deepening commercial ties between the countries as a kind of a first step towards reapproachment. Evidence of this can be seen in a personal letter sent by a member of the German Foreign Ministry, Abraham Vorbein. You can also see the letter here in the presentation. The letter was sent to Shenar shortly after the ceremony, in which he stated that, and I quote, "Ships are a symbol of the relationship, and I hope that the Dagan and the additional ships that will be delivered as part of the reparations agreement will bridge not just the physical distance between our two countries." And it seems that the reparation ships and the reparations envoy did bridge the physical and symbolic distance. Several months afterwards, they were to facilitate the arrival of German naval experts to Israel. And shortly afterwards, Israeli and German seamen were to meet and work together. The demand for separation between Jews and Germans as well dissolved, as can be seen by the festive ceremony at the Deutsche Werft shipyard in October 1956 for the launch of the reparation ship Theodor Herzl. Shenar's wife was now chosen to smash the bottle of alcohol on the side of the ship, thus dissolving the distinction between a Jewish and a German joyous event. The German Chancellor and Shenar, Felix Shenar and his wife Ilse, and you can see both of them here at the picture as well, stood side by side. Even the two had previously met. This meeting in the port of Hamburg was special because it did not take place behind closed doors, but up front in public. The speech given by William Scholz, head of the Deutsche Werft shipyard, brought the separation between the two sides by emphasizing the symbolic significance of this event. It was the first passenger ship built in Germany after World War II that had the honor to be built for Israel. Shenar's speech, which was given in German, emphasized the way in which the two joyous, the Jewish and the German, were intertwined. He opened his remarks with close and unifying words, according to which the launch of the ship was a defining moment in the implementation of the reparations agreement, since this ship was to carry on board people from all over the world who wished to take part in the process of establishing the old-new homeland, Alt-Neuen Heimat. His choice of the term old-new homeland was surely not accidental, but intended to allow the continuation of his speech, which reviewed the Zionist activity of Theodor Herzl in the German space, where the roots of the Zionist enterprise had been planted. Still, one cannot refrain from asking why he chose the word Heimat and not the word Land that appeared in Herzl's book, Alt-Neuland, and whether this reflected his attachment to the two homelands, the one from which he was expelled and the one into which he was absorbed. In any case, at the end of Shenar's speech, he emphasized the role of West Germany in building the State of Israel, thus shifting from the roots of German-Jewish partnership to the present and future ties between Germany and Israel. The new connections forged around the reparations succeeded difficult moments even a few weeks after the launch of Herzl, with the outbreak of the Sinai campaign at the end of October. Despite the Israeli concern, Germany did not stop the transfer of payment to Israel. And indeed, throughout the second half of the 50s and the beginning of 1960s, the members of the mission continued to implement the agreement. A total 49 German ships were purchased for Israel from the reparations funds. 1,500 factories across the country received machines and equipment, and sectors of the economy such as electricity and agriculture were developed. Their work also facilitated the platform for developing connections between the two countries, culminating in the signing of diplomatic relations between the two countries in 1965, thus leading to the closure of the commercial mission in Cologne and opening of an embassy in the capital of Bonn. So a few words just to conclude in my talk today. I share with you my mixed gaze on the Israeli mission, moving between the personal and the professional. I illuminated aspects of the delegate's life and work in Germany and depicted the formation of early contacts between the two countries, as well as early relations between Israeli, German-speaking Jews and Germans, only a few years after the Holocaust. The German Jewish heritage of the Israeli envoys was a mediating power between the two countries. On the conceptual level, the German Jewish past was a component in the basis of the suggestion to dispatch Israeli representative for a long stay in Germany, only a few years after the Holocaust, meaning for the concept of renewal of ties with the country and its people. But upon the mission's arrival in Cologne, the conceptual encounter with Germany turned into a real re-encounter with the place where they were born, raised, and educated. The beginning of their work evoked a professional acquaintance. They had already acquired their skills in German companies, facilitated the work in a common language, German, which would make their work more efficient. And the ongoing professional contact gradually became a personal encounter when the parties met for joint meals, sometimes also deviating from the professional space, as offices or factories, to the private sphere as home. The implementation of the agreement was surely influenced by the economic interest of the two countries. However, the countries' attitude towards political relations were opposites. The attentiveness of the head of the delegation to the German discourse, which at the beginning of the 1950s was in favor of deepening ties, mediated the gap between the two positions. Interestingly, the German Jewish past was a visible communication channel for building a symbolic reapproachment between the sides, when explicit statements about reapproachment between the countries were too early to be expressed. The mediation power of the German Jewish past was also present at the second half of the 50s, when the tables had turned, and it was now Germany that refused to deepen the relations with Israel. The roots of Jewish-German partnerships were the platform for the present and future ties between Germany and Israel, when politically it was impossible to openly discuss reapproachment. So to some extent, the voyage of the German-built ships and cargo to Israel, where they would contribute to the development of the new state, reflected the voyage of the German-born Israeli envoys between the two spaces. Thus, both the reparations good and the reparations delegates had two layers of belonging that to continue to exist side by side, leading to reapproachment between the two countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Irit Chen. That was a very interesting talk. I learned a lot, and I got a few questions via email. And one question is one of my questions. I don't now remember the author of, but I told you sometimes about the author of memories about being a diplomat in Germany, who pointed out that there were different point of views within the Israeli purchasing mission between the more purchasing-oriented personnel and the more diplomatic-oriented personnel like Shinar. I read something in these memories. Do you have a point about that?
So yeah, so the book, I assume, was written by Yochanan Meroz.
Exactly.
Was also later on in the 70s an ambassador of the State of Israel in Germany. And at 1959, he was also part of the mission. He was the political advisor of the mission. So the mission was it was a commercial mission, right? It wasn't a political, as I said, a political delegation, because there were no diplomatic relations, and there were several points there were no interest of to develop political relations. That was the Israeli opinion in the beginning of the 50s. So the commercial delegation was not supposed to work on political affairs between the two countries. But soon the Foreign Ministry of Israel realized that political affairs would come up, and so it was decided to send political advisors to the commercial mission. And then we can really see conflicts regarding to political issues. We can see, for example, if we refer to Yochanan Meroz and Shinar, then Meroz was very much in favor of talking to the SPD, to that party who was on the opposition, while Shinar himself was in favor of talking more to the ruling party than to the opposition. And then, for example, there were conflicts between the two. Another conflict which we can see is also towards the relation to Jews in Germany. Should we contact or not contact with Jews in Germany? So Shinar, for example, was very much against contacting the new formed communities in Germany. While on the other hand, for example, other delegation members who were dealt more with political affairs were indeed interested in getting closer connections with Jews in Germany.
Oh, that's interesting. That leads to my next question. I'm wondering if there are any contacts. I know about contacts between a Jewish community of Cologne, but was there also purchasing personnel taking part within the religious life of the Jewish community in Cologne, or were they more like separated from that and had their own Jewish life?
Mm-hmm. So it is a very interesting question, and we can say that generally, since the head of the mission, Shinar, was not that much interested in getting in contact with Jews in Germany, in general, there was not much of contact, not a reach and contact between the mission and the community. But we do know, and we can see that Shinar and other members of the community of the mission did take part in events that took place in the community. In holidays or in events or celebration of the Israelis' Independence Day. And of course, also they took part in the inauguration of the synagogue in Cologne in 1959, which you also mentioned earlier. So, but I can assume that with regard to Jewish life in Cologne, I can assume there were some kind of connection. For example, I can assume if someone was interested in buying kosher food, right, that they would have probably needed to get in contact with the community. Or if they wanted to go to synagogue, so and to prayer. So I guess there were also that kind of connections. But at least in the documents the Israeli mission that kept in the archives. I couldn't find any evidence for that, and most of the family members of the diplomats that I talked to, some of the wives of the diplomats and some of their children, could not remember very strong ties. And interestingly, some of the children of the mission members, they didn't go to school. They went to school either to the Belgian high school in Cologne, or to boarding schools outside of Germany in the Netherlands.
Okay. Oh, thank you very much. That's interesting. I knew from several contacts. I told you that my chair member in a German-Israeli Friendship Association, Danny Meyer, told that there was a letter asking the purchasing mission asking the Jewish community if there are any Jewish hotels in Cologne to accompany their relative guests, and the Jewish community told them about 2 or 3 hotels, and that's so they had contacts, but perhaps not so strong contacts. Was there any German Jewish personnel within the purchasing mission? I heard something about it, but I'm not quite sure if my sources are correctly as a German Jewish personnel, or were there all of Israeli descendants?
Mm-hmm. So the envoys themselves were, of course, Israeli, and as I mentioned, most of them were, not all of them were natives of Germany or German-speaking regions. But it was very interesting also to note that there were also local Germans who operated in the mission. So not necessarily, by the way, not necessarily Jews. Some were Jews, but also locals who just worked there as in administrative field, or women who typed messages for the mission members. And we even know one case in which one of the delegates even married the local woman who worked there in the mission.
Thank you very much. A last question, which was posed: in which way reacted the Israeli economic delegation on the anti-Semitic wave in winter 1959-1960? Was one question.
Mm-hmm. So on the one, we can say that they were very much surprised, even though I have to add before I answer about the events in 59, it is important to note that the delegates experienced anti-Semitism even before. Yes. So upon the establishment of the mission, for example, anti-Semitic notes were sent to the mission, referring to the past of the delegates, that they were Yiddish speakers, and also to other aspects of their Jewish connection to religion, and also some of the reparation cargo, which was shipped from Germany to Israel on one cargo. So there were also swatiskas on the cargo itself, which I only found only one incident in which it happened, but it did something that emissaries dealt with even before the events of 59. But as with regard to this, I can say that so for them, they were not surprised, the envoys, because they believed that anti-Semitism still exists in Germany. And they were actually they highly criticized the German society for not dealing with the past, and also the regime for not taking actions to deal with it, according to them. But they believed that anti-Semitism was something that it wasn't could be shown in public. So they believed it was more latent anti-Semitism. They also they also sent criticism and their and to the German government in Bonn. And at some point, they even tried to let's say use this incident as an attempt to try and to affect the German government and tell them, look, this is a sign that we need to establish diplomatic relations in order to work in the field of education and to closer connections between the two people. But this attempt, as we know, did not bear fruits due to political reasons that I already mentioned. So for them, it did not surprise them. It mainly they mainly criticized the society and the country for not dealing with the past.
Yes, thank you very much. I now got an email from Benzion Weber, who tells that he remembers that on Yom Ha'atzmaut, the members of the Jewish community of Cologne were invited to the Israel mission at the Subbelrather Straße, Innere Kanalstraße, sometimes. Do you know about this?
So I do know that the community was invited and to celebrate Independence Day, and I mentioned that as one of the examples for kind of connection that we can see. The holiday is Israel Independence Day, and I think there is also there are also very famous some famous pictures from that event. I can try for a minute to try and look for it. If you can find it interesting, just to show you also the picture in which guests were invited into the celebration. If we have 1 minute, I can try to.
Yes, no problem.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Let's see. Here it is. Let me see which one. So I can show you this picture from the Independence Day of the 9th Independence Day of Israel from 1957. Where is the Zoom? Let me show you. So I took this picture when I was meeting with some of the diplomats' children. So they had these pictures, which are
a flag ceremony. Yes.
Mm-hmm. So we can see these pictures from 1957. Yeah, with raising the flag of the State of Israel outside the mission's office. So I think it is very touching to see this.
Yes, that's very touching. I'm glad to see this. I think that's a good point to finish our presentation because we don't have any questions anymore. And I'm happy that you talked to us, and it was a very moving presentation. And I will have to have a look again at this presentation because I was also very concentrated on the technical issues of our presentation. And now I thank you, Irit Chen. I thank also the German-Israeli Friendship Association in Germany for funding this with our funding of the local communities of the German-Israeli Friendship Association aus dem Fonds der Arbeitsgemeinschaften uns zu unterstützen. Das wird noch nicht unser Abschluss der Reihe 75 Jahre Israel sein. Wir werden auch noch, wie gesagt, den Vortrag mit Dr. Nora Pester, den Bildvortrag über ihres Leben in Israel präsentieren. Den Ort erfahren Sie in Kürze auf allen unseren Kanälen. Ich würde mich freuen, wenn wir an diesem Tag kurz vor dem Christopher Street Day, dem CSD, Sie auch nochmal begrüßen könnten in Präsenz. Und abschließend nochmal meine Dankesworte. Thank you again, Irit Chen, and I think we stay in contact. Thank you again.
Very much. Thank you.